Hi, recpped here. Today I will show you a mystery horror thriller film from 2017 titled Kyrsyä-Tuftland. Spoilers ahead. Watch out and take care. A woman takes a summer job at a remote village to find some peace, unaware that the people want more from her than her professional skills. A hooded man walks through a forest and soon reaches a road where a bus awaits. Upon seeing him, the driver heads into the vehicle and together they drive off. Elsewhere, Irina throws out items from her apartment. She also learns that she wasn't accepted into the summer job she applied to. The next day, her teacher notices Irina is unable to focus, so he calls her and asks what production costs are. Bitterly, she claims that she doesn't care since companies focus more on costs than keeping people happy. She thinks that their society steals their freedom with the promise of enjoying their last breaths as pensioners without guaranteeing that they'll survive that long. Her rant puts tension in their class. Later, Irina's friend, Mia, tells her to stop blaming herself for her misfortunes. All things considered, she ought to zero in on her mid-year work. However, Irina uncovers that the organization turned her down and she threw out her ex, so she needs to track down one more method for paying rent. After school, Irina goes on a run, uninformed about a more unusual watching her. He later watches her in her apartment, but when she looks, he's not there anymore. While Irina showers, someone rings the doorbell. When she checks, she only finds a letter outside. Soon, Irina boards the bus headed to Kyrsyä after receiving an invitation to the village to escape from the busy life. While waiting, she talks to Mia on the phone, who thinks that the trip is ridiculous. Irina defends that it's a summer job where she'll be mentored while working for a textile manufacturer. During this, the strange man is also on the bus, watching her. Irina falls asleep during the trip and wakes up upon arriving. Outside, the driver compliments the strange man on his nice catch. When Irina steps out, the strange man introduces himself as Purdy. He's also heading to Kyrsyä, which is a 10 kilometers walk away, so the two walk together. On their way, she expresses how she couldn't find anything about the place on the internet. Purdy assures her that she's not going into some hillbilly village. They chose to hunt and grow their food to be friendly to Mother Nature. If Irina wants peace, then she shouldn't disturb nature as well. Soon, they arrive at the village where Maja and her daughter, Maria, greet them. The mother shares that Maria additionally lived in the city yet returned in the wake of becoming weary of the enormous world. Another resident, Siri, welcomes Irina to eat, yet she requests to take care of her assets first. Maria's grandmother complains that Irina doesn't know that in Rome, she must do as the Romans do. Maria assures the old woman that they'll only take a few minutes before leading the guests to their room. Still, the grandmother complains that the big world didn't do the young woman well, but Siri assures her that their guest will learn. Inside, Maria takes Irina to the room that they'll share. She advises the woman to listen to the elders since they've lived longer and know how to behave. Irina argues that the world constantly changes, but her companion claims that it's not like that there. Soon, Irina joins the villagers for a meal. Before eating, the grandmother leads the prayer, thanking how they're free from men who defy their creator and the world's oppression. They also thank the opportunity to live as a family, as they've accepted that they don't need whatever they cannot do. After the meal, Irina walks with Maria, noting how she liked how their prayer focused on being thankful instead of Jesus. Maria comments that most people can't appreciate anything nowadays without satisfying their ego. She tours Irina around the village, pointing to another house where a man named Mono lives, though she asserts that he prefers to be alone. Maria also takes her to the goats, from whom they get wool to manufacture. Irina likes the idea of working hands-on instead of studying theories and marketing at school. Later, Irina steps out when she hears noises from Mono's house. This creeps her out, so she heads back to her room. In the morning, Irina checks her phone but finds that she can't get a signal in the village. During breakfast, Siri suddenly asks about her family. Irina shares that her parents divorced 6 years ago because they didn't love each other anymore. But the grandmother insists that love doesn't end, it just changes. Irina adds that her father has 2 sons with his new wife, so the grandmother comments that her family must be fertile. When Irina shares that she isn't in a relationship, Purdy explains to the elders that many youth study before having kids, much like the previous one who took a job there, Hannah. Curious, Irina asks about her, but Maja says they don't know where she is after she left. Since her summer job starts later in the week, Irina is tasked to help Purdy gather mushrooms. Before going, she notices a young woman cradling a baby. Purdy explains that the woman, Hilja, hasn't recovered after her baby became sick. The two then go to the forest, where Purdy teaches her which mushrooms are poisonous. Suddenly, Irina hears a horn in the distance, and Purdy explains that it's from their hunters. He shares that the horn attracts animals to make them easier to hunt. Irina scoffs at the idea of charming the animals before killing them, but Purdy argues that it's more compassionate. That evening, Irina joins Maria in the sauna, where her buddy admits that she left the city subsequent to having an unsuccessful labor. She was terrified of becoming ruined, so she got back to the town. Maria learned that people from the city can't coexist with nature, and Irina agrees since most don't appreciate what's around them. Maria then asks why Irina accepted their invitation, so she admits that she needed to escape and think things through. She starts ranting about her ex-boyfriend, but Maria shushes her as Mono gets excited with that kind of talk. Curious, Irina wonders about Mono, and Maria admits that he's good-looking. This makes her think that Maria is in a relationship with him, and the woman rushes out in embarrassment. As they head back, they hear grunts from Mono's cabin, so Maria tells Irina to go home alone before heading inside the cabin. Just then, the hunters finally return, and Irina sees them happily gutting a raccoon. This bothers her. The next day, Irina dreams about being in the forest, cradling a baby while the hunters approach her, holding their weapons. Suddenly, blood seeps from the baby's cloth, so she checks and finds the dead raccoon in her arms. That morning, Irina swims in the pond but finds two men watching her. Fortunately, they leave her alone. Meanwhile, Maja, Siri, Purdy, and the grandmother are in their chapel. Maja worries for her daughter, but Siri reminds her that Maria has a great sin to overcome. Maja safeguards that her grandkid would have experienced more assuming it were as yet alive. At the point when Siri questions it, the mother provokes her to check with somebody named Carrie. Suddenly, Purdy predicts that their migrant bird will be forced to do something, but a bull will defend her. The bird will then choose to leave, and a bear will help her decide. He declares that Irina will lead them into change, but the grandmother worries about inviting outsiders into the village. Maja assures her that they've learned not to talk about babies so suddenly since this scared Hannah. Instead, they'll have Severi charm Irina so she'd choose to stay. Later, Maria points Irina to Severi and Jalmari, whom the newcomer recognizes as the men who watched her in the pond. Changing the topic, Irina wonders why Purdy didn't join the men during their hunt, so Maria explains that everyone has their tasks, like how she teaches the younglings of the village. Irina finds this odd since there are no kids around. The men approach them, and Severi comments that he's glad to see Irina, as women nowadays aren't willing to do women's work. Irina asks what he means, so Jalmari answers that it's making children. Quickly, Severi hits him for saying that. Irina disagrees with this, but Severi insists that it's the truth. Before things escalate, Purdy urges the men to leave them alone. After they leave, Maria expresses her fondness for Severi, so Irina sarcastically comments that her companion should get together with him. That night, as Irina reads in their room, she gets annoyed at how the lamps are waning in and out. Maria makes sense of that their power isn't steady there, yet their electrical man is giving his all. At the point when Irina actually gripes about it not being sufficient, Maria considers what they do in the city when confronted with issues. Irina notes that they get educated and motivated, but when someone can't do their job well, they find someone else who can. Maria believes they'll do well if they love their work, but her companion argues that most people don't like what they do for a living. The guest complains about people who expect society to provide for them since she believes that everyone is responsible for themselves. This makes Maria ask about those who can't survive without help. Irina clarifies that there are treatments for their condition, but if they can't recover, they're hospitalized, so they don't drift among the rest. Later that evening, Irina dreams about a pale-faced young woman with a missing eye. She follows her to the attic, where the woman introduces herself as Kyrsyä. She points to the barn nearby where her mother is and asks Irina to help her. Kyrsyä then touches the other woman's cheeks and suddenly reaches around her throat, threatening to kill her as her mother did to her if she doesn't help. The next day, Irina notices Severi and Jalmari exit the barn where Kyrsyä said her mother is, so she sneaks in. Inside, she finds the place empty. The two men suddenly return, so Irina asks them where Kyrsyä's mother is. The men laugh as they reveal that Kyrsyä is dead, but she didn't move on due to unresolved things. Severi adds that Kyrsyä was suffocated after her mom became wary of her, so her spirit needs to show her mom a thing or two. Resolute, Irina asks where Kyrsyä's mom is, however Severi corners her. Fortunately, Siri intervenes to take Irina to her summer job. The women later begin spooling pom-poms, which Irina thinks is an activity suited for kindergartners and mental institution patients. Siri notes that their work is precious, as they bind the threads like how nature binds men and women together. This prompts the women and Purdy to chant about their belief that love spun from Kyrsyä binds the soul to its righteous ground. Creeped out, Irina storms off as the others follow her. Irina calls them fools for thinking that she'd spend her summer making pom-poms. While she rants, she doesn't notice the noise from Mono's barn. Suddenly, someone breaks out of the cabin, and Irina is shocked to finally meet Mono, who tackles her while the others merely watch. Severi and Jalmari arrive and remove Mono from their guest. Frightened, Irina crawls to the axe that Severi dropped, but Mono frees himself from the men and grabs her again. As the man attempts to remove her clothes, Maria calls his attention, revealing herself to him to distract him. Mono chases after Maria while the shaken Irina cries. Maja explains that Mono is a strong child, so he's been producing their electricity through hard labor. It keeps him busy and out of trouble. Seeing them not bothered by what happened, Irina calls them sick and decides to leave. However, Purdy reveals that the next bus doesn't leave until tomorrow, so Irina has no choice but to wait. Afterward, Maria finds Irina attempting to utilize her telephone once more, yet with no karma. She gives her tea, yet Irina requests that she let her be. When Maria notes that they don't let sad people be alone, the woman sarcastically points out that they lock up mentally disabled people instead. Maria reminds her how men are awful in the city, but Irina still wants to go home. As they head back to the house, they find Severi and Jalmari wrestling on the ground. Seeing this, Irina wonders if they're secret lovers, but Maria defends that they just love each other because they're all family. Suddenly, Irina feels dizzy as the villagers gather around her, including the bus driver. Having mixed something in her tea, Maria holds onto Irina, promising her that the village is where she will be loved. Finally, Irina collapses, and Purdy declares that Severy will give her a baby so Kyrsyä will have a new beginning. Later, Irina is dressed in white as she's being forced to marry Severy. She yells that she didn't go to Kyrsyä to get married, but Severy reminds her that she came to work and that a woman's job is to bear children. Hearing this, Irina calls the villagers inhuman for forcing her into this and for how they treat Mono. Severy gets pissed at her rants, so he approaches the woman, but Siri reminds him that he shouldn't touch her until they're married. Severy argues that they should have prepared his bride by now, so he tries to grab Irina. This leads Siri to hit him over the head, which causes every other person in the space to stand. Reviewing Purdy's expectation of the bull that guards the bird, Siri understands that she recently did that for Irina. Thusly, the more youthful lady should decide to remain or leave. Because of this, they let her go, so Irina runs off, passing by Hilja, whose baby is actually a doll. While Severy shouts in anger, Irina grabs her cardigan outside, then finds Maria cleaning blood from herself while Mono is chained beside her. Horrified, the woman runs into the forest. Without shoes on, Irina hurries away as Severy and his friends search for her. After getting far, Irina finds her phone in her cardigan and tries calling for help. However, she hears Severy getting close, so she runs. While hunting her down, Jalmari teases Severy for not getting his bride because he doesn't pray. Severy punches his friend for this, just as the other men report where Irina is heading to. Elsewhere, the woman gets knocked out by a hooded figure. While unconscious, she dreams about the villagers watching as Mono kills another Irina. When she wakes up, she finds a blind woman who thinks that she's Hannah. Irina realizes that the woman is Kyrsyä's mother, Inkeri, whose eyes were plucked out and put in a jar around her neck. Irina asks if she killed her daughter, so Inkeri defends that Kyrsyä was born with many abnormalities, which they accepted until she started to belittle their lifestyle. Kyrsyä returned thoughts after Maria and showed her general public. It got to a place where Kyrsyä simply needed to work on their town, however couldn't have cared less about them, so Inkeri did what she expected to. However, the villagers thought it was wrong to waste life as she did. Suddenly, they hear Jalmari and Severy close by, so Irina lies that she's Hannah, and the villagers are accusing her of hiding Severy's new bride. When Inkeri argues that they won't harm her, Irina promises to help the woman return to the village if she helps her. Finally, the men arrive and tell Inkeri that Irina might send the police to Kyrsyä. Inkeri claims that Irina hasn't been there, then begs Severy to take her back to the village. She insists that her daughter wanted to destroy the village, but the men refuse since nature hasn't eaten her eyes. They believe that the eyes are the window to the soul. Therefore, if nature doesn't want to consume hers, then she's still impure. To prove her worth, Inkeri puts down her shriveled eyeballs on the ground, which a rodent approaches. However, it doesn't eat them, so the men walk away. The rodent climbs onto Irina's hand, who's hiding in Inkeri's tent. This makes her flinch, which the men hear. Before they can investigate, Inkeri eats her own eyes to prove that nature can still forgive her. Disgusted, Severy just orders the woman to bring Irina back, then they'll discuss if she can be welcomed home. After they leave, Inkeri demands finding Irina, ignorant that she's now conversing with her. Irina asks for what reason she'd help the locals, so Inkeri demands that she'll be excused in light of the fact that they actually love her. Irina then asks what will happen to Severy's bride after she gives him a child, so Inkeri assumes that they'll cut out her tongue so she can't report the villagers. Getting an idea, Irina suggests that the bride will head to the road, so Inkeri agrees to take her there to find the woman. Suddenly, Irina's phone rings as Mia is calling her. She answers the call while pretending to be Hannah and listing what happened to her in Kyrsyä. This doesn't fool Inkeri, however, so she approaches the frightened woman, realizing who she is. The confused Mia gets suspicious at what's happening just as Inkeri grabs Irina and cuts out her tongue. Thanks for watching video.